Phrygia, Libya, Egypt, Crete, Arabia, Parthia, and Rome were crowded together in the large square when the humble disciples of the Nazarene began proclaiming the good news, addressing each group of the multitude in its own language. A wave of wonder and joy invaded the overall spirit. Regarding that divine concert, there were skeptics who attributed the revelation to a state of madness or drunkenness. But Simon Peter stood up and explained that this was the light promised by heaven to illuminate the darkness of the flesh. Ever since then, the light of Pentecost has incessantly been poured out upon the world. Until that moment, the disciples had been weak and indecisive, but from then on they broke from the influence of the environment, healing the sick, uplifting the spirits of the downcast, and speaking to the kings of the earth in the name of the Lord. Their exhausted strength had been infused with the power of Jesus. The era of mediumship, the foundation of all Christianity's achievements down through the centuries, had been established. The moral prejudices that dominate the path of humankind has been at work against the influence of mediumship even till now. But it is upon mediumship, that glorious light from heaven given to humankind at Pentecost, that the spiritual endeavors of all true communities of Christ's doctrine are being built, and it is mediumship, having spread from the apostles to all human circles, which has reappeared in Christian Spiritism as the immortal soul of revived Christianity.
All righty. With that message, we will turn the light off. We'll just finish short. Have our log, and then we'll pray. So let us close our eyes. Take a moment to feel ourselves present in the room, feeling the loving vibrations of our spirit mentors and guides with us. Dear Mother, Father God, we are so thankful for the opportunity of being together. We are thankful for being in the companionship of one another, bringing together the desires and the joys of study and of service. Today we pray, God, that we can connect with the mentors of our Spiritist Society so they can better guide us in our studies. That we can open our hearts and our minds to the loving influence of our spirit mentors. We pray that those who have accompanied us from the spiritual realm, who are here to receive these teachings and also to receive the healing, the spiritual treatment from the nurses, physicians, and therapists of the beyond. May our moments together of reflection be an opportunity for us to practice service through mental concentration and donation of our spiritual fluids. We pray for those who have their names in the book of prayer, May they all receive the love and the kindness of the messengers of light in their homes, in their neighborhoods. And we pray for those connected to our center in both realms who are unable to be here with us today. And we pray, God, for your protection. And with our permission, we begin our studies today. And so, welcome friends with that message about mediumship, right? As we study mediumship, just going to make sure our friends on the internet can accompany us. Bluetooth off this time, so nobody needs to listen to me twice. Interesting sometimes. It's technology after all, so sometimes it doesn't work. Yes. Right, it's working. Not that I like to look at myself in the screen. So we've been talking about in the month of February of the blessings of reincarnation. Talking about, how blessed it is to have this life, even though it might be hard at times. How we can fulfill our reincarnatory plans. Who are coming to live with us? Who are we attached to in the spiritual realms, right? There's a lot of different considerations on this lifetime. And he builds, hopefully builds, so that we can each and every day learn a little bit more to improve our relationships with ourselves. So this personality of this lifetime, right? Which we will see, it's pretty much the mental reflexes of the many lifetimes we've lived and the people around us. So there are many chapters in the book, in the Spirit's book, on the Spirit's book, on returning to the physical life, how things are planned. There's kinship, family ties, of blood ties, spiritual ties, the importance of childhood, as we'll see. But each and every incarnation, we want to improve. That's pretty much what we're here for. I'll focus our conversation on two chapters from the book Fun Life. One is chapter 11, which is the cradle, and the other one is family, because we want to talk about family, because reincarnation starts within a family. Starts way, as we saw, there is a whole host of planning that occurs with our mentors, our family members. Remember in the book of Solar, Miss Laura is preparing to reincarnate. Her husband had returned. They worked in the Solar. They made a home there. He was there before they came. So this group of spirits are coming back, preparing to go back and return to be together. And Emmanuel, the book is from Emmanuel, will say in chapter 11, it says, Heavenly justice through its mercy allows us a new beginning. So he's talking, in the beginning of this book, it's important to understand, he's talking about the mind, our life being a mirror of our minds. So what we think, our thoughts, waves going out in the universe, resonating with like-minded thoughts, change the spiritual fluids around us, creating the life that we live. So whatever our desires of our hearts are, the things we focus the most, those are the things we tend to materialize in our lives. It's very true in the spiritual life, because if you think about something, you might end up going to the spiritual realm and spending time there, doing the things that you're focusing on. But when we are thinking about how we create a better life, how we live better with one another, but see, heavenly justice, because he's talking about how, sometimes we don't do what we're supposed to do, we return to the spiritual realm, there's guilt, there's some suffering. And then finally we're able to restore the balance. Recognize we need to return, we ask for a return. And there are different levels of relative, asking. There's a lot of things we ask and some things we can't really have. But but it's a new beginning. And he says here, we will come into contact with our creditors and our debtors for the settlement of debts we have contracted, which are perfectly annotated in the archives of divine law. So he's talking about how when we return to a family situation, of course, there are 8 billion possibilities, right? There are 8 billion incarnates, so not every life is going to be the same, not every planning is going to be the same. You may need to reincarnate in a different family because you created the demise of that family in the past. You may not be necessarily directly your family members that you reincarnate with. But he's saying debtors and creditors. So people who we work together, so the loving relatives that are in our lives, the spirits we are sympathetic with, the spirits we are antipathetic with, right? We saw last time in the reincarnation of Segismundo, one of the children was going to be a gentleman who hurt the father in a previous life, as a current father in the previous life. So that's a credit debtor kind of situation where they're forced to come together for a specific purpose of redressing that mistake. It's not a one-to-one relationship. We don't know when that happened, right? It could have been many years ago, and then now they are finally ready to face that situation. And sometimes God will impose some things to us so that's the lesson we need. But he says, family relationships, froze. Okay, we'll start again. Use the word to explain. And his incarnation learned flexibility too. So he says, family relationships can be considered an important basis of mental reflexes. And he says, and those reflexes can be pleasant or unpleasant according to what the past bring back to us. So if I'm going about my life creating pleasant thoughts and mental reflexes, meaning I look at what's good, what is complete, or what's lacking, which is hard to do because we're focused on fixing things. Or if I see someone I don't like, but I recognize they might be children of God, there might be a reason, then I'm sowing, then I'm going to harvest goodness. But if we go around our lives sowing unpleasant reflexes, always negative, always sour, always finding fault, or getting into the cultural norm that is individualism is what it is, where I take mine, I prepare mine, my career, my family, mine. And a lot of us are very still tribal, we only think about our basic needs in our own immediate family. But if we talked about reincarnating in many different places. If I have a prejudice against someone who is from a specific place, who knows? Maybe God will put me there next time to see how good it feels, Or maybe I was there before and I wasn't treated well, and now I have that, But it's coming back. It's going to come back to us when we put out in the universe, because thought is life. That's the name of the book. And we've studied this book before throughout the years in our Sunday studies. And he's going to break it down. He says here, family. You have to return in a family. Whether our family gave us what we wanted or not, right? Because it's different from what we need. Whether the family was perfect or not, we return to a family. Even when the family wasn't good, it's still an opportunity for learning. So he's going to talk about high-level spirits. We know we reincarnate on the earth, and then us. So there's one paragraph about high-level spirits. He says, we do not include here spirits from elevated levels that pioneer evolution. When brought to dwell in a commonplace environment, they quickly overcome it by creating a mental climate of their own. They then proceed with the task of renewal that they came to accomplish. So let's say Alcyone, on the books of Emmanuel, she returns to help one person, she's in a higher plane, she might be able to overcome whatever the mental reflexes of a certain environment is. And as we're going to see, when people congregate in crime, they might return to that area there where the crime is, so they can slowly get away from those mental reflexes. Because we're going to see the progress is gradual. So you have to be able to resist the impulses of joining, right? And then he talks about us. So these are the highest spheres who can create their mental environment around them. No matter what happens, they can do their job. They can be happy. And he talks about us. He says, everyone is temporarily adjusted to the range of ability that is within our own capacity to develop. So when we talk about mental reflexes, we want to think about, where was God putting me in this life? Who was around me? What kind of mental reflexes were we together creating? What kind of abilities we brought up? Because those are imprinting on one another. In the first chapter, he talks about we are immersed in the images that we project and receive. So each and every one of you, as I say the word apple, thinks about apple. It might be apple, or it might be the apple, or it might be New York City. So it can be, I say apple, it can be green, red, sour, sweet. There's probably 15,000 new varieties of apple coming up anyways. But your image of apple is intermingling with my image of apple. So we are immersed in these images. And especially this time of the earth, in certain areas of the world, we have Mardi Gras. So imagine the mental images going. So when you go in there, it's almost impossible for you to be different from the mental images that are being produced around it. So you kind of go together. So, depending on where we are, the environment will help us to progress. Remember, it was about new beginning, new renewal. So you have a certain amount of mental reflexes, of tendencies, and you come together with people who have their tendencies, their mental reflexes. And sometimes we think we want to be different from our parents, or we don't like them, we don't belong there. But at the same time, if we review it, we are all together reflecting the same things with one another. And it says, however, it's the home environment that brings together a group that reflects one another. So we're all there to learn something in different manners. Well, God bring us together, prepare, and say, you guys need to address this. And there's preparation. You saw this before. In the book Missionaries of the Light, there are designing and planning pavilions. So all of us have a plan, and the technicians carefully designed the way we're going to look, how tall we're going to be, because those are experiences we talked about in the world. If you're able to walk, you have one experience. If you're unable to walk, you have one experience. If you can see, if you can see, if you can hear, those are all valid experiences, but they are different. In a world that is yet to be equal for everybody. In a world where the law of love, justice, and charity is not there yet in its full capacity, right? But that's one of the reasons we are here. But the need for us to come back, help one another to grow. Because he says your spirit reincarnates in the same sphere in their family relationships. It meets again the links that they have woven for themselves according to the thread of their thoughts and inclinations. The beautiful words of Emmanuel. The links that you woven with the threads, kind of like building, knitting, crochet. You would do, if you sew, you thread things. So what are the thoughts and inclinations that we are bringing into our families? So we watch our children develop. They have their own thoughts and inclinations. But also it's the most important part for us to be able to mold it. So if we see someone who doesn't like school, we need to instigate them to be studious, because there's a reason, Or if they don't like to work, we need to focus on developing their workmanship. Someone needs to be around others. Someone who doesn't know how to do, sports. Not they're going to be the all-star players, but teamwork, physical development. Because think about Jesus. He was the ultimate team player. And to be a Christ spirit, you have to know everything. So each and every incarnation, the little bit that you learn builds upon, which also makes you think of how many lifetimes there are left for us to learn all of that. But some of those lifetimes may not be here anymore, might be somewhere else, because we may learn something, because the world is changing as well. So I'll give you an example of this reincarnation in the same sphere, so they can work the stuff that happens. So in the book, In Life Goes On, there's a family. This is hard to, originally was animated, so things would move around. So I removed the animation so that I could explain. So the story, if you haven't seen the story, I have to read it. So it starts with Evelyn and Ernest. So if they are in gray, it means they passed away at some point. So Evelyn and Ernest have the same right here. Evelyn and Ernest are here, and I forgot to put in gray because he passes away. They both pass away from the same disease. But Evelyn has Bridget and Desiderio as their parents. Okay? Mm-hmm. Bridget and Desiderio are married, and then Amancio participates in the hunting expedition where Desiderio is killed. Then Bridget now marries the stepdaughter all at once. It gets pretty complicated. And then, once time comes, Desiderio realizes that Amancio didn't really kill him with someone else, but he fought because they were shooting at the same time. They forgive one another, and he's going to reincarnate as an adopted child. That's why important of adoption these days, because maybe the child is offered to someone who needs to come back to them. So with time, he's going to reincarnate under the care of these two, and guess what? They're way past retirement age. And they could be there playing golf every day, going to the beach every day, but then Evelyn and Ernest in the spiritual realm will encourage them to adopt a child that is born from a very poor woman that ends up dying of TB, tuberculosis. Now, Kyle and Evelyn are dating, but she's also involved with Tulio. And because she rejects Tulio and marries Kyle, Tulio kills himself. So she's involved in this trauma here because that's why we think about polyamorous, right? Polygamy. That's what's going on out there in the world. Because she played with both of them, and men do that as well. He killed himself. Later in the spiritual realm, he's going to be deceived. They're going to work together. So she's going to convince him to return. So he's going to reincarnate as a child of Cain. Okay. The rival here that he hated. Mm-hmm. Actually, Cain made him look like it was a suicide, but it was really a homicide. This story is way more complicated. And then you have Ernest and Elisa. Ernest dies in the spiritual realm. Elisa also passes away after they know diseased. She has also, there's another spirit that is not depicted here, but they have Veracelina. Mm-hmm. Veracelina is having an affair with Kyle while Evelyn is about to die. Mm-hmm. So when she dies, Evelyn and Ernest inspire them to come together because he didn't want to. Why would he? He was already having a living girlfriend. People think it's okay, just hook up, right? Then eventually he gets married. Once Veracelina is on the funeral of her mom, they come. It's a beautiful scene. They come down, inspire him, and he thinks he's thinking, should we get married? We should put my foot down. We should get better because I've been living this bachelor life, right? He also steals the money from Elisa. He makes her sign all her property because they were wealthy to him before she dies. Now, what's going to happen? She's going to reincarnate as a child of them. Not only he's going to give it back to her, but the spirit says he's going to be so rich that he's going to give 3 times, 4 times more when he stole. And then Tulio comes back and they're going to be there. So these are things that these people, by their actions, their mental reflexes, and things they did, create a situation that divine providence comes and says, let's put you all back together. Evelyn and Ernest are in the spiritual realm, and they, let's think about like an internship to be a mentor, right? They are guided, but they're going to commit to guiding this family for at least 30 years. Because those people have to grow and come together and marry and know each other, so on and so forth. And then we don't know the rest. We don't know what happened before. We don't know what, of course, we don't know what's going on in the future because these people have relative free will. Nobody has absolute free will but God. We have free will, but then it took time. Tully was in the spiritual realms, suffering, feeling sorry for himself. He's rescued. He finds Evelyn he was looking for, gets attached to her. She has to convince him to let it go. So those are the mental reflexes that we're creating. And that's why it's important that the families exist. Even animals have mates for life and have families for life. Right? And it's hard. It's not easy to be in a family. It's not easy to be together for long, right? You have to give and take it, give and take it. And life goes on. And the end of the movie, there's a movie too.
Yeah, there's a movie.
And as if you have movies or books you'd like to donate, we'll start collecting for loaning. But I have some here that you can watch and you bring it back, so I'm just going to watch as well. So the book ends with the rebirth of Desideria to Mariana, who is the poor lady. Brother Claudio is there. Evelyn Ernest is there, and Amancio and Bridget. They're already old, but there's nothing wrong. There's so many children out there in the foster care system. There's plenty of course, grandparents should participate in the life of their grandchildren and help. And the birth of Desiderio is where the book kind of ends, and they are joyful because we want to bring life to everybody's very happy, but it's very challenging because from there on we can fail a lot, we can make mistakes and take 5 steps back. When we're discarnating is also a moment for us to celebrate as a new graduate. We should be more joyful as well when people discarnate, because that's, if they didn't take their lives, if they didn't hasten the death, but if it was something gradual, that's a moment that God says, now you've done your part, come back. Because when we are reincarnating, we are primed to being on those environments in the family, and they can choose to be like, no, I don't want to marry you, I'm not going to live there, I'm going to move. They can do away of the plan. And you can see on this book how much work goes behind the scenes between Ernest and Evelyn, going back to their families and inspiring them and talking to them in the house. Tulio goes himself to inspire her, the future mother. It's all described there. And people think their thoughts are theirs. Sometimes they're thinking, they're planning. It's because they're like inspiring us to see, please do this. We talked about this. And they, as you saw in the book, Missionaries of the Light, they take us in the spiritual realm, come together to the family meeting, so on and so forth. And then he says there is this mental, it's good. Says there's in this way, there's psychological heredity. It says is in a way due to the natural gathering of spirits, the same inclinations and activities. They will describe a couple of examples of us coming back to this area where we are doing the same things. The first example he gives is someone who is born on a primitive environment. Let's say someone who is born in a hut, like in the Amazon. Someone who needs that kind of primitive, simple, focus on today kind of life. He said, maybe we were born there many times. How long it took us to forget the development of tools and society and technology for us to be here, right? But he also says, when you're fairly civilized, we may dwell a long time in the same social place. Here we assimilate the experience we need until we can progress to different environments. So we may be reborn in cities over and over again. We may be reborn as farmers over and over again. We may be reborn, think about areas of the world where it's constant conflict, that it was there before and it's still here. Those are spirits coming back. Let's try again. There could be an explanation. And also the spirits that are in the spiritual realm inciting us to those kinds of activities. I'm not blaming spirit mentors and spirit obsessors and everything. We have free will as well. But we may return to be fishermen. We return to be, those are things that discipline, scarcity. Those are things we have to be, maybe we were born. He gives an example of musicians. It says a family of musicians were more easily gathered in the frames of the same divine art. The spirits who incarnate as children of the family, the same companions, will stimulate its musical vocations when in the spirit world. They can continue to reflect each other in their activities throughout many centuries. And there may be an oddball that they can't play anything, but they're born in a musical family. There may be a reason why they need to be inspired. They need to learn something new. It's very difficult for us in the state where we are, for us to say, oh, this family is this. We shouldn't look at people and say, oh, this is the reason why you're there. We don't know. Only God knows. But we can look around and you start to see the patterns. All those people do the same thing. You come together. Think about it. How many times you said as a child that you're not going to do and say what your parents did and said? Guilty as charged. When I get old, I'll never do that. And you, every now and then, you find yourself uttering the same words that they did or said. Right? Those are you're born malleable in a sense. You come with your experience as a spirit. But as we saw last time, in childhood is where your brain is able to receive new input. But if you come and all they do is every day they go to work, every weekend they do barbecue. They go to work in the week, barbecue. Are you going to grow up and do what? Go to a concert? No, you're going to grow up doing barbecue on the weekends. If you don't read to the children, and everybody's, right? Families that read or families who watch soap opera. You grow up to watch the TV more because those are the stimuli and the mental reflexes around you when you're malleable to know. That's why it's very important to watch those tendencies. And in the question 383, talks about what is the usefulness of having to go through childhood. He says a spirit incarnates in order to perfect itself. During childhood, it's more accessible to the impressions receives, with which it may assist it in progress. Person in charge of its education should contribute towards this goal. So we are here to make them better, not just to fulfill the curriculum to go to Harvard, because it might be even selfish. But bring citizens to the world where we'll say, what you do affects the people who are sleeping in the hotels right there, the homeless families in the motel. When they don't have, it affects your neighborhood, even though a neighborhood is rich. Maybe those children who we are supposed to help cannot resist the mental reflexes of being around crime, and they go and steal your car. They go and steal your stuff. You're affected too. You may not be directly affected. Well, as people, we tend to hoard the resources to ourselves. Because throughout millennia, we were in the savannah. We had to hoard resources. We had to look for things to survive. But that's why new spirits are coming to show us that it's different. We can be different. And those are the superior spirits. We look at them and we're like, how can they do that in that environment? I couldn't do that. And I'm not saying these two people are superior, but there's a person who came to the U.S. It's a couple. They came to the U.S. and did their things like we did for education. And they had a choice. Do I go back? Do I stay? And they went back to the most massive slum. I forgot the country in Africa, but it could be anywhere. It could be in Rio and São Paulo. They have slums everywhere. Right? Skid Row, we have slums too. They're different looking, but there's the same concept of poverty and lack of resources. These two, I think he met her here, so it's a mixed couple. They went back to the slum to live, and they're creating environments where they are teaching people that human excrement shouldn't be thrown in the open. They're creating systems inside the slum that allows people to have toilets, and creating a system of entrepreneurship. So who's going to clean? Who's going to maintain? That gives jobs to people, and they expand to food, to childcare, because the children are there in the sewage. While we still have on the earth, because we are immersed in the mental images and thoughts and suffering, we're not going to progress because we don't have. And we can't say, oh, that's because that's the experience they have to have. No, we have to see those things and try to help. And you look and it's like, if you had the opportunity to live, you would leave. You'd be like, I'll never come back here. I'll send you some money from, wire some money. But they chose. That's a choice, a good choice, because there's a lot of people now helping. Or we have companies that invest in people who get back to their communities. Not just the regular, I'm going to invest, make money, give money to my stockholders. Like Acumen is one of them. Founded by someone who was doing this type of work in Africa and other places, and they invest in local people. There's one that can give back to the community, like cheap solar lamps, cheap solar bulbs, because the majority of the world, a lot of places don't have electricity, which we take for granted. It's keeping this life, us here, and warm and illuminated. So they are not their business model is not just profit; it's giving back. Of course, they need to make money to be able to do the micro loans that they do, the investment they do. Building wells, building toilets, building schools like Fraternity Without Borders. There's a raffle going on right now for a piano. Buy some. If you win the piano, you can give it to us because we need music. There's a raffle. They go to places in Africa. They do work in Brazil too. They build schools. They build the village. And they allow people to be part of the community. Instead of us parachuting there and fixing, they bring people from the inside. And the Fraternity Fraternity on the Streets is in the U.S. as well. We may not be building schools, but they are out in the street giving food to the homeless. And there's some in New York, very active, and some in Denver, Nevada, which are like, there's a lot of community. The homelessness in those areas are more visible based on the geographic distribution, right? Here in Richmond, it's more hidden in certain parts, but if you live in the city, everybody's there. It's very visible. So we can help people change the mental reflexes around them, because if the poverty and the lack of, and now everybody has one of these, so that means everybody can know what the rich person around the world is. They never have, right? The things we focus on, the big cars, the luxury brands, and the stuff. They can see that and they can yearn to have that. If you're miserable, they're not gonna have. So if we can make their lives a little easier, the mental reflexes slowly progress. Also, he says here on the mental reflexes, in the concept of everybody coming together, it says sculptors, poets, politicians and physicians, businessmen and farmers, they often have ties of affection and repeatedly share the same family genes. It's common to have a family where someone else follows. It was more common in the past that you follow the lineage of your family, right? If you had lawyers, they were like, there's no other route but lawyers, but physicians. And that's something that we can work on if someone in our lives is different, because then it may be a reason for us to not be proud, because question and answers, I think it's around 685. It talks about, it's like 860 more or less, talks about the biggest impediment to progress is selfishness and pride. But being in a family, you have to be, the training should be to be selfless and not prideful. We're working. And it says here, by working together through the law of rebirth, they maintain the evolutionary acquisitions through which they express themselves in space and time. It's not because someone abused their talent. Let's say you're born in a family of writers, and then people use their talents of writing to write war manifestos, or what people do nowadays, music that is low level, romances that are low level, or dark things on the web, that's writing. Then you misuse the talent, you may be removed, and from that point, Divaldo shares someone in his family who was a writer, and she wrote a lot of romance novels, as you see people read. And then she came to around his circle, and she was illiterate. She never learned to read and write. Had an inkling that something was going. Imagine you can't read and write. It's very, very limiting, because you're like cut off from society in a sense. You can only exist and do certain things. You can't read. And there's millions of people now still in that. Now we have to work to help them, because maybe this time they will appreciate. So why to be in a family? In the last but not least, he says, therefore, in our family group, we have both the links of happiness we have been able to build through love we expressed, and the fetters of constraints and animosity. So there's that. It's always going to be until we get to a point where the divine world, maybe Jupiter, it's not divine world, it's one above, where goodness reigns, right? There's 5 levels. We are in the second rank. There's a while to go. But it depends on us. It depends on us doing. Being here, being disciplined, going against the grain, it's a nice day. It's lots of options, but we're choosing to help. Because we know when every time you come, you're receiving the treatment. As we're going to enjoy music, that's treatment. As the spirits know where we're going to sit, they can install things in our chairs. And then they can count on us to be here, and they can bring the spirits to help us as well. And he says that these chains come from disturbing vices we fashioned in our destined memory, and which we need to undo. So it's about undoing the things. And I'm not giving you an image of suffering, like you're destined to suffer. That's not it. Because one good can erase a multitude of wrongs. So if we choose every day to do one good thing, we can balance as a credit. We always in the balance, like overdraft. Creditors and debtors, we are in overdraft. God is like, okay, I'll give you some, I'll give you some, I'll give you some. Eventually, we are going to be asked, but it's never to the same intensity sometimes that will be caused, because they know, we talked about in the book, Missionaries of the Light, that pavilion, we ask for lame hands, lame feet, don't work this, and the spirits are like, come on, not ready yet. And some have to, some agree to it. We're discussing a book that is very relevant to people who celebrate Mardi Gras, Carnival, sex and obsession. The people who are there creating the system, they return, the 2 main characters return as twins to come together. One's going to be blind and mute, and the other one's going to be physically fit, but mentally disabled. And then there's a person who participated who will be taking care of them, and many other orphans. So sometimes God is like, okay, the way for you to not create those mental reflexes again, find the same people that you're doing that stuff with, is for you to be located remotely in a place there's no resources until your people you will hurt or you associate with can't find you. And that's why we see sometimes mental disabilities. Because if your thought patterns are disrupted, you can't connect with those people from the past. In the book Messengers, the guy who knew the medium who was able to have the knowledge of who he was in the past life, and he started recognizing the people he was together, and it's like, oh, what about this third, right? And then went and derailed everything. So sometimes God forces us to have a limitation, and people are like, oh, but this is not Spiritism. Because Spiritism is free will. I chose. Yes, you chose to sow, but now it's harvest. The choice is on the sowing. The harvest is mandatory. We have to come together. But in order to undo those chains, he says, it's a task that involves work and self-sacrifice as well as patience and humility. There's nothing more self-sacrifice, patience, and humility than being in a family. These are the new resources for the production of a spiritualized mental reflex that are capable of erasing the effect of previous struggle and unfortunate conduct. So the invitation is like, why are we here then? I wrote a couple of things. There is a summary. To perfect ourselves, as you saw, a spirit incarnates to improve itself. To redress past mistakes and to learn to love one another. Also, when you are living in family, you are necessarily fulfilling or invited to fulfill the divine laws. Can you think of some of the divine laws that we could fulfill by needing to be in a family?
Law of society.
One of them. What else? We perfect ourselves. The law of progress. I don't think it's called as a law of progress.
Justice, love, and charity.
Justice, love, and charity. I wrote down law of reproduction. Because people don't have families. There's nobody can reincarnate. We're gonna have to go somewhere else. Law of preservation. Where we learn to dwell with the resources and help one another to improve. But ultimately, the goal is to see everybody as family. And it's hard. It's one thing that we are realizing slowly is that we can't continue to live the way we are living. Earth can't necessarily contain. We'll adapt, we'll invent things that will make our lives better. But if every time we want something, we think about buying the same thing or providing the same amount to someone else, that would be one way to start. So if you have a grandchild, you want to give them something, buy something for another child that is the same that don't have. And then you're going to tell me, I'm going to go broke. Yeah, maybe then you don't need that thing. Because there's a lot of needs, a lot of wants that we label as needs. And ultimately, the kid wants your presence. They don't want your stuff. It's an interesting way of if we have trouble using the resources of this life, then we can make a commitment. Can I give the same thing to someone else, to donating the same amount, donate to the food bank, bring the food to the shelter we're going to deliver in a couple of weeks, come spend 2 hours with the seniors, so that when we spend 2 hours on many, by the way, there's nothing wrong with going for barbecues, but if that's all we do every weekend, twice a weekend. How do I know this? This is what my family did when we were growing up. The concept of volunteering was go to church in the meeting. But that's why we're invited to see other things. You just go from, and there's nothing wrong. You enjoy each other's company. But at some point, we have to look around and be like, have eyes to see that there's others that are in need. And you can be joyful, you can have fun. We do have fun when we go volunteer. And we feel good when we leave. We can pray for them. We get to know them. They expect us, so there's a lot of good in that. We can slowly start to expand the family because we don't know if one of those people have ever been connected to us in a different life. Today they return and we have to give something back. Remember, Kai, who stole all the money, now he's going to receive the woman as one the child. So when he discarnates, she's going to have all the money he gave. He stole it more. We don't know if someone in our neighborhood was part of our family in the past. It's just now they have to have that experience. So that's a good way to talk about it. And we will, any comments, any questions, see if there's anything online before we go to a moment of music. Welcome, dear friends. I see some of you online thinking differently about our families now, hopefully, or the challenges and difficulties. If it was easy, we would be on the other side writing the books. I always say that. But people look at us, not at us, because I'm nobody, but people look at certain speakers and like, they're so awesome. I'm like, yeah, they're microphones. We are microphones. What does a microphone do? Just replicate. The microphones are creating anything that I don't say. Microphone is an assistive device, So if the speakers were that good, they would be writing the books, not just talking about the books. So we're all people. We're all incarnated on the earth, trials and expiations. So we all can learn. Every time you do something like this, you're learning from to and from. Maybe more than many people. We're also here to help the spirits because we don't ask much, but when we are here, we just ask that the mental concentration be on what we're talking so that the spirits can use us. Because perhaps there are family members that come here to help, support, receive help from this life and other lives. But maybe we're just returning with the same people to learn something until it's ready to give up. And I was joking the other day, I was talking to someone who was having issues with family members. And I said, okay, that's fine. You don't want to forget. You don't want to forgive. Cool. When you discarnate, you're potentially going to find yourselves together somewhere. And then God might allow you to come back. And then you have your second chance. But forgive now. Let it go. Let it go. And that's why we have Disney creating stuff for the children so they can learn to let go. But it's a choice. The person's making, no, I don't. It hurt me. I will stay. And it's like, well, God is giving you this knowledge today, maybe, because we can't say anything for certain. For anybody, we shouldn't be saying anything about anybody, but we can say maybe. Maybe this is a life that you're going to forgive and you will free you. Because when we forgive, we free ourselves. Because the other person who hurt this person is living life. It's not already moved on. There's another family, children. He moved on. This person took a picture and stayed there, playing the film. It's almost like the LPs. You're old enough to have what's the name of that? Vinyls. The vinyls where there was one scratch, the thing would be like playing the same thing over and over again. Like let it go so that now you can flourish. If God, if it was in the 5th or 6th decade of life. God hasn't taken you yet, so there's time, But you can only take the horse to the water, can make it drink. But the only thing you can do is to show by example. When the person look around and see that this life is easier when you let go, maybe. Because we can't tell people to let go if you're still holding someone else on the. That's good. All right, dear friends. You want to say something?
I think it's hard, and I don't judge because I do think it's hard. And many cases, I put myself in those situations. I go like, I don't know if I would do it, but I do learn like that talker Georgia Laha, right? Like he says, you want to make sure you come back with someone, hate him, and don't forget. Next life you're connected, no question. So it's a funny way to do it.
Yeah, because you're going to create that mental chain. I remember in the book, Workers of Life Eternal, they describe the discarnation of Demas. And he was a great spiritist worker in the Spiritist Center. Wasn't a bad person, didn't do anything wrong. We never brought those elements of prayer, meditation, or into the house. Kind of like, okay, I won't teach my children because when they're older, they're going to choose kind of situation. I won't impose. But there are ways to meet people halfway. There are ways to bring the teachings of Spiritism, because Spiritism shares teachings, right? It's not totally brand new. You can bring it to your life. And then as he's discarnating, the wife is missing him, is anticipating the loss, and she's sending, there's a net. Think about a fish net kind of thing. And they describe that they have, the spirits had to remove her so they can do their work. And every time you think, you're sending, it's almost like you're sending the lasso, right? You're keeping the lasso in an animal kind of situation. And you want to let go, yeah, you return together. Maybe for that reason and other reasons we don't know. But well, friends, we will log off and go ahead and do our passes in prayer and music. And we'll see you next week. Thank you for joining us.